the first woman to be arrested because her husband had signed the Declaration of Independence? Hi, my name is Jason. Welcome to Founder of the Day. Today we're going to tell the story of Elizabeth Lewis, but before we do, I'd like to note that we are in a different location. I've been shooting my videos for the past 2 weeks up in my office, and I realized, hey, it might look a lot nicer if I'm in front of my bookshelf. I'm sure I'll end up in my office every once in a while when my kids are home running around or awake after their bedtime. But for the most part, I think we're going to shoot here. Please let me know what you think. But let's get into the story. Now, Elizabeth Lewis was about 29 years old when she married her husband, Francis Lewis of New York. She had met Francis through her brother because the two men worked together at the same business. Now, after they left New York City after they acquired some wealth and moved into Whitestone, which is in modern-day Queens. Now, Francis was called into action by his community and sent to the Continental Congress, where he signed the Declaration of Independence. What's interesting, though, is the British had begun gathering outside New York City, and they continued to gather and gather and gather. And eventually, they decided to attack. Now, Elizabeth was at her house when suddenly some cannonballs started ripping through the wall because the British were attacking. Now, everyone started to run and try to find a place to hide, and Mrs. Lewis went and stood in the hole that the cannonball had created and defiantly stared down her British aggressors. Now, her servant said, "Get away from there, dude." And Mrs. Lewis said, and I quote, "Another shot is not likely to strike the same spot." Now, that seems to have been true, but what she had underestimated was that the British would debark from their ships and come into her house, which they did, and they looted because she was very wealthy, and they took all of her belongings, including her shoe buckles. But it turns out that the gentleman, I guess I shouldn't call him a gentleman, the invader who went and removed her shoe buckles went, "Wait a minute, this is fake, this isn't real gold." And Elizabeth Lewis said, "All that glitters is not gold, sir." He didn't love that. So they took her and they brought her to New York City, where she was the first woman imprisoned. I should say, first wife of a declaration signer imprisoned by the British. And she was treated remarkably poorly for a woman of the time. I mean, this was more of a gentlemanly warfare style as they viewed it, and she was given meager rations and hole-ridden clothing, and she was kept there for about 7 months. Now, one of her servants was able to sneak her some food and some better clothing, and also took letters of hers and got them to the Continental Congress and her husband and family. And I should mention that she was actually brought into prison with her daughter and grandchildren, though they seem to have been let go fairly quickly. But Miss Lewis lived in these harsh conditions, and it really adversely affected her health. Because at this point, I had said she was 29 when she got married, but at this point she was mid-62, 63. So being kept in moldy confinement really did some damage, especially for the way healthcare was back at that point in time. So eventually, word gets around to George Washington that his colleague, Francis Lewis's wife, is being treated like absolute garbage. So he went to 2 loyalists' house and took their wives. Not personally, but he had men do it for him. And he sent a letter to the British saying, "Would you like us to treat these women the way Elizabeth Lewis is being treated?" And they went, no, please don't. So they did release her on parole, but she was not allowed to leave New York City. About that time, it turns out that the same servant who brought her clothing and food and took her letters became severely ill. Now, unfortunately, I was never able to locate his name. I did search for it, and if any of you can find out this gentleman's name, I would absolutely love to know. But it turns out he fell pretty gravely ill, and she went and took care of him the way he had for her. Now, he was dying, he was on his deathbed, and the gentleman was a Roman Catholic, which is a little bit strange for him to be living in New York as a Roman Catholic. I would have to assume that he was born and raised in Maryland, where Catholicism, really the only state that had Catholics, colony, I should say, and state that had Catholics, other than Quebec, which doesn't really count for our purposes today. So I would assume he came up from there. Unfortunately, there were no Catholic priests in British-occupied New York City. Somehow, Elizabeth was able to convince, I guess, her husband or someone in Philadelphia to get a Catholic priest to travel to New York City, sneak in through the British guards, perform last rites on a slave, and then sneak back out. Which is the type of thing that I need to bring up because it speaks worlds to the character of this brave, strong woman. About 7 months later, she's released, and she is able to travel back to New York City. To Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, she's finally reunited with her husband. Her son had gotten married to a daughter of Robert Livingston, and she's able to not only meet her daughter-in-law for the first time, but their new child. And having been fully vindicated, seeing her family again, Elizabeth passes away just a week later. So that's the story of Elizabeth Lewis. It is one of many, many tales of brave people and women and patriots. And I absolutely adore that story because of her courage to stand up directly into the faces of someone stealing buckles from her shoes and suffer hardships, but still have the tenacity to say, no, this slave that took care of me for so long, I need to take care of him. And she is very rarely spoken about in revolutionary circles, but her story most definitely needs to be remembered. And I will say, she is one of many, many, many women in Cokie Roberts' Founding Mothers, is a book that I should have pulled off the shelves. I'm sure it's on there somewhere. But unfortunately, Cokie Roberts just passed away about a week and a half ago, and it's very sad because she was, if you want to learn about not just women in the Revolution, but founding mothers of America, the book Founding Mothers by Cokie Roberts is absolutely the #1 resource, and I can't recommend it enough. I will leave an affiliate link in the description below just to make it easier for you to find. And if you have any questions or comments, if you like the new digs, please let me know. And make sure you hit like and subscribe. And if you click right about here, you can find our new video.